Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Inspire Youth Laureate Cross Canada Tour. My name is Suzette Amaya. I came all the way from Vancouver. I'm Kwakwakiwa, Cree, Coast Salish, and Niska. I was born and raised in East Vancouver, and I'm your MC for this exciting event that we planned for you today. So really excited that you're here. I know that you will be inspired by the stories you hear from the laureates who received Youth Inspire Awards for their outstanding achievements. You will understand why, and hopefully you will be motivated and learn more about the Inspire and how they can help you achieve your dreams for higher education. We have materials available for you. If you just look back there at the back wall, you'll see that there's some booklets, there's surveys, and if you have any questions, you can visit the staff that's here at the table immediately after and outside the room as well. And, as Indigenous people, we're the fastest growing population in Canada, and you are our future. So let's get started. Welcome. We are on our second stop in Canada for the Canada 150 Inspire Youth Laureate Tour. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 1 territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We'd like to thank the Government of Canada for making this tour possible, Trans-Canada Corporation, the tour presenting corporate sponsor, and Shaw Communications, Inc., the Youth Laureate sponsor, for helping make these cross-Canada events possible. Both companies are proud to be supporting the tour as part of initiatives to acknowledge Canada 150. The Trans-Canada is also launching its new $1,000 to $5,000 scholarships to support students that live in communities where it operates. So you can learn that online. So to give you some background as to why we're all here today, it began with a desire to celebrate Canada's 150th anniversary of Confederation. So the Government of Canada established the Canada 150 Fund, selecting 40 Canadian signature projects. Inspire was selected as a unique Indigenous-led charity that focuses on supporting Indigenous education. Every year, Inspire celebrates Indigenous achievement by organizing the Inspire Awards, which includes First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Youth Laureates. Inspire is showcasing these youth in the 2017 Cross Canada Tour happening in 7 cities. So we launched just last month in Ottawa, and now we're here in Winnipeg, which is really exciting. Yes. And we will be in Saskatoon, Yellowknife, Calgary, Vancouver, and closing in Montreal in November. So now I'd like to hear from Anne-Marie Gabriel of Inspire with this message in French.
Bonjour. Pour vous donner un aperçu de la raison pour laquelle nous sommes tous ici aujourd'hui, je dirais que, poussé par le désir de célébrer le 150e anniversaire de la Confédération canadienne, le gouvernement du Canada a créé le Fonds Canada 150 et a sélectionné 40 projets signatures canadiens. Inspire a été choisi en tant qu'organisme de bienfaisance dirigé par des Autochtones qui appuie l'éducation des Autochtones. Chaque année, Inspire célèbre les réalisations autochtones en mettant sur pied les prix Inspire au cours desquels des jeunes lauréats des Premières Nations, Inuits et Métis se voient remettre des récompenses. Inspire présente ces jeunes lauréates dans tout le Canada lors de sa tournée 2017 qui se déroule dans cette ville et qui a été lancée dans la belle ville d'Ottawa le mois passé. Winnipeg est la deuxième ville visitée et sera suivie par Saskatoon, Yellowknife, Calgary et Vancouver. La tournée se terminera à Montréal en novembre.
Awesome. Merci. Our objective today is to showcase 3 amazing laureates. Now I'm going to just stop for a minute because when I found out who the laureates were, I quickly went on Facebook, went on Instagram, went on Twitter, so I was stalking them, and they're so phenomenal, and I was really excited to meet them. So today you're going to hear their stories, which is really cool. So while you're listening, think of some questions. Yes. So the laureates, as they talk about the importance of a solid education and how Inspire supports students' dreams for a brighter future. The panelists will share motivational stories about their childhood, community, challenges, postgraduate success, and how Inspire has supported their journey. These role models should inspire all the students and all of you here to dream big. Now I'm pleased to introduce 3 panelists for today's session.
Et maintenant, je suis heureuse de vous présenter les 3 panélistes de la session d'aujourd'hui.
So we will start with Fauna Kingdon, who is a Manitoba of Métis raised in Iqaluit, Nunavut, and now resides here in beautiful Manitoba. In 2006, Fauna obtained her Bachelor's of Commerce degree with a distinction from the University of Manitoba. She has also earned a Master's of Professional Accounting degree from the University of Saskatchewan and a Chartered Accountant designation. Fauna was the only Indigenous Chartered Accountant in 2009 graduating class and is one of few Indigenous Chartered Professional Accountants in Canada. She also earned her Certified Aboriginal Financial Manager designation. Fauna received a Queen's Jubilee Medal and a Canada Day Youth Award while being named both the National Métis Youth Role Model and National Aboriginal Youth Role Model. Fauna received her Youth Inspire Award in 2005. Fauna is currently the Chief Financial Officer for Fisher River Cree Nation and Health Co-Manager for Little Grand Rapids First Nation. She is also the owner of Reveal Laser Aesthetics, a skin rejuvenation center in Manitoba. She's come full circle to help Inspire again and is now on the board of directors. Thank you for joining us today, Fauna.
Nous débutons avec Fauna Kingdon, une métisse de Manitoba élevée à l'Iqaluit en Nunavut et qui habite ici dans la belle ville de Winnipeg.
Fauna Kingdon. All right, next we have Elizabeth Zarpa. Elizabeth is an Inuit from Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador. She holds an undergraduate degree in political science and international development studies from Dalhousie University. And most recently, she graduated with a Juris Doctor degree from the University of Victoria. Throughout her legal education, she worked within several different populations and provinces, focusing on environmental law, Indigenous legal orders, criminal law, human rights law, family law, and Aboriginal law. In 2013, Elizabeth received an Inspire Award in the youth category. At that time, she worked with Poki Tutit, my Inuit, I'm learning, Inuit Women of Canada, and Inuit Taparit, Kananatami. She also has been involved in the Circumpolar Youth Leaders Program, coordinated the annual multicultural youth gathering in Labrador, and worked with the University of the Arctic International Secretariat in Finland. In May of 2010, she was selected as one of 3 youth from Canada elected to serve on the Canada World Youth National Board. The following year, Zarpa was elected to the Ananauka Tiget, I'm learning, it's amazing, Board of Directors and the Youth Representative. In September 2017, she'll begin her studies in political science at the master's level at the Memorial University of Newfoundland and a doctorate degree from the University of Victoria.
Inuit de Happy Valley Goose Bay au Labrador, Elizabeth a obtenu un baccalauréat en arts, en développement international et sciences politiques et a récemment décroché un doctorat en jurisprudence à l'Université de Victoria. En septembre 2017, Elizabeth commencera ses études en maîtrise en sciences politiques à l'Université Mémorial de Terre-Neuve. Bienvenue, Elizabeth.
Yes, Elizabeth. Oh, wow. I'm really excited to meet everybody. It's so great. Okay, and apologies if my Inuit language, but I was learning before we started. I'm getting it, right? Okay. Next, our third panelist is Kendall Netmaker. Kendall is an Indigenous entrepreneur who grew up on Sweetgrass First Nation, Saskatchewan. In grade 5, his best friend from South Africa gave Kendall the opportunity to take part in soccer. He never forgot about what his friend had done for him, and he later founded the popular clothing brand Nietzsche Gear, a lifestyle brand that empowers youth through sports. To date, his company has contributed thousands of dollars and impacted hundreds of youth across the country. He developed his business plan while completing 2 degrees in arts and education at the University of Saskatchewan. And after participating in several business competitions, he received thousands of dollars in startup capital to launch his company. After graduating from the University of Saskatchewan, Kendall grew the brand from a small 1-bedroom apartment to a kiosk to several pop-up stores and recently opened a new headquarters in Saskatoon. The brand is now sold to consumers across North America through other retail shops and online at nietzschegear.com. Kendall dedicates his time to growing his company and motivating young professionals across Canada and internationally to achieve their dreams. Kendall was a 2015 recipient of the Youth First Nations Indspire Award. Welcome, Kendall.
Entrepreneur autochtone, Kendall a grandi au sein de la Première Nation de Sweetgrass en Saskatchewan. En 5e année, son meilleur ami sud-africain lui a proposé de jouer au soccer. Kendall n'a pas oublié ce que son ami a fait pour lui lorsqu'il a fondé la ligne populaire de vêtements Nietzsche Gear. Kendall est le lauréat des prix Inspire en 2015 dans la catégorie Jeunesse Première Nation. Je souhaite la bienvenue à Kendall et vous prie de vous joindre à me féliciter tous nos lauréats pour leur réalisation exceptionnelle.
Kendall Netmaker. All right, so I'm going to come up and sit with you all as we start the panel. There we go. What do you think of all their bios? Yeah. All right. So, if I get this mic going. I feel really inspired because I honestly did look you guys all up and I was like, oh my gosh.
She was stalking us.
I was stalking them because when I went on, we could be candid here, right? I want to hear about, for so many times we meet inspiring people and the Indspire Awards, they do such an amazing award show that's broadcasted and lots of people in our communities across the nation go. And you see all these recipients, but not often do we get to hear the story and the achievements because it's such a small bio. So today I'm really excited to ask some questions and let you elaborate on your own personal journeys. Whew. Okay. Well, we're going to start with Elizabeth. As a young Inuk woman, what was it like first moving away from Goose Bay to pursue an education in Halifax?
Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for the amazing opportunity to speak. And I think if many Indigenous people had the opportunity to speak, we'd all have inspiring stories.
That's right.
We just need that platform and those opportunities. In terms of moving, well, in Labrador, we have a college in the North Atlantic, and we have distance courses through a university that's stationed in Newfoundland. Has anybody ever been to Newfoundland or Labrador? Okay, just a handful. All right. So where I come from, there's no university in Labrador. And so for me to pursue, higher education at 18, I had no choice but to leave home. I had to go leave my family, my community, and everything like that. And going to Halifax was a really big culture shock because I come from a community of 10,000 people where, there's Inuit, Innu, Métis, settler populations, and everybody knows each other. You go to the grocery store and it's like a big time to have a conversation about your life, like, to a city where, you know, there were African Americans, there were Muslims, there were people from Mexico, people from Germany, and the food was so different. Like, I didn't even know what an avocado was when I went to Halifax. You know, the people that I was in university with, they came from like urban settings. So like going there and actually trying to learn the content of what university education means in the context of, you know, all this culture shock was deeply, deeply challenging on many levels. But I think a lot of Indigenous people who, you know, growing up in rural Canada, whether it's going from Labrador, going from Nunavut, going from Nunavik or Inuvialuit, you know, leaving home to go to school, and even like people who live on reserve have to leave their culture, their community, and face like racism and discrimination. Those are real things in the classroom, especially in political science. So anyhow, it was a huge transition, and especially as a first-generation university student, connecting with home and telling people what I was experiencing was also a very lonely place, but I found pockets of other Indigenous people, predominantly First Nations, that I connected with in the journey that helped me get along. And I learned so much about, like, I didn't know anything about sweats, and because in like Labrador it's a little bit different. And yeah, it was a huge transition from learning and at 18. So yeah, it's 10 years ago now, but yeah, that's it.
And being so young too, you know, coming into that culture shock, was there things that were sort of difficult in that transition?
Well, I knew, when I first went to school, I didn't even have a computer, and everybody had laptops. And my dad was really adamant. He was like, you got to get a computer. And I was like, no, I don't. I'll study without one. And then he's like, I'll get you one. And I was like, no. So anyway, the transition between wanting to go and having the desire to go and the hard work and initiative to go was present. But also there was a huge, it was a very different transition, and connecting with people from home, like my family, about what I was experiencing was a challenge. Adjusting to the cultural diversity and the city living and trying to succeed academically in first year was a challenge. There were so many different things, especially at 18. Like, I was young, you know, like I didn't fully understand. So there was a lot of changes that I had to adjust to and adapt to and succeed in. But, you know, give me a couple years and then I was on my way and I figured things out, and now I can drive you anywhere around Halifax.
Here in Winnipeg, we have our Winnipeg Art Gallery, and we're in the process of building a huge Inuit Art Center and considering and hoping it is a gateway for the North and for the artists to come and flow back and forth. What other ways, Elizabeth, can we as a society help the Inuit? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Indigenous peoples that include the Inuit, but it's the whole culture in the community is very tight, and we unfortunately don't know a lot about the community.
So I think that one thing that's really evident within the Canadian context is the term Indigenous, Aboriginal, Native are very homogenous terms, and within that definition, there's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and a lot of Canadians don't necessarily understand the distinction between those three main groups. And so one thing that I think is really pertinent to understand is that in the North, there needs to be more educational opportunities, and accessing the North is expensive. To travel to Iqaluit, to travel to, Inuvialuit, to travel to Labrador, the ticket prices are extremely high. And I think that's something that needs to be taken into consideration if accessing the northern regions where a majority of Inuit live. Then that needs to be made more affordable. Issues around access to, food security. The prices of food in the North is extremely high. That's something that needs to be considered, and also looking into the housing crisis, like the low levels of housing, overcrowded housing, things that are pertinently issues that arise predominantly because of contact, colonization. And I think the awareness of that type of history needs to be taught within schools, and it needs to be expressed and elaborated on more in depth. So there's those political kind of sociological, historical issues that could be addressed, but also in terms of Inuit culture. I'm the first Inuk woman in Newfoundland and Labrador to wear my traditional Inuit sillipak to my call to the bar, where I officially became a lawyer. And I think accessing, traditional attire and to represent who we are and where we come from in important ceremonies is something that is becoming more recognized. But I think these things need to be more celebrated and understood that this is a part of the Canadian fabric. And so those are some of my ideas.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. Well, being so young too and transitioning into university, I can imagine a lot of people who come from rural communities can relate to that. Fauna, what was it like as a Métis girl growing up in Iqaluit?
So, it's definitely a unique experience because my mom is Manitoba Métis from a really small Métis community of Thicket Portage, and she comes from a family of 17 siblings. So from the same parents, not blended or anything. 17 kids. Wow. So yeah, huge family. And so growing up in Nunavut, it's obviously 85% Inuit. So I always knew I was Native. I always just thought I was Inuit. Like I had all my friends were Inuk, like we spoke Inuktitut, so I just assumed that I was like them and that I was Inuk. And it took one of my Inuk friends to tell me, you're not Inuk. You're something else. And so I went home and I asked my mom, so apparently I'm not Inuk. And so she had to explain. She's like, no, you're a different kind of Native. There's, the whole history lesson. And I was mind blown. My whole identity was just shattered. So I didn't understand that. So always kind of growing up knowing that you're Native, like my mom's Native, but my dad's white. So trying to grapple with that. Being, I guess, biracial, trying to figure out, okay, I'm Métis, I'm white, but I'm surrounded by Inuit culture, which is amazing. I wouldn't have take that back for anything, but it was different, it was unique. You're trying to figure out who you are, especially as a young woman, that's challenging enough. And so I think when I looked to going to university or where I was gonna go, I chose Manitoba for that reason, because I wanted to experience, what is Métis culture? What does it actually mean? Wanted to be surrounded, I guess, from people that were like me, I guess.
Well, and how did you go about learning about your Métis culture?
I definitely chose, when I was looking to go to university, I applied to different provinces. I applied to Simon Fraser, Calgary, Manitoba. And so when I was kind of looking at it, I did look at the Aboriginal programming that was available. And I also wanted to live on campus. So I was 17 when I left home, when I left Nunavut. So I was definitely looking for the Métis specific programming. And U of M offered that very strongly. They had an Aboriginal business program, specifically in commerce. They had a lot of programs that I felt like I could participate in. And because when you think about it, Nunavut, although it's large, it's like 1/5 of Canada in terms of landmass, the population of the entire territory is 30,000 people. The entire population of U of M is 30,000 people.
Wow.
So when you think about it like that, you're kind of like, okay, basically I'm moving to Nunavut in this really small contained campus. And so it's overwhelming if you think about it like that, but that's why I wanted to live on campus, because there's going to be people who aren't from here that are just like me, kind of transplanted. Obviously not from Nunavut, but definitely still transplanted. So,
Working in the business world, which is still traditionally a man's world, what are some of the things that you had to overcome to be as successful as you are today?
Well, definitely I think there is that stereotype, but I think just knowing
knowing that going in, I tend to kind of listen more, I don't try to overtly compete. If somebody wants to talk to me and engage with me, I will definitely listen, but I think a lot of people are kind of surprised when I come back with an educated or articulate answer, and I just kind of keep doing what I do. And I think if you're prepared and you're patient and you're hardworking, that comes through. And I don't think, I just never really saw that blockade for myself. I think because if you perceive that there's a block, then there is a barrier. And so I never really felt like that was something standing in my way. If anything, I just try to be the best at what I'm doing. And I think that really is just really what I think most people should do.
Well, sure sounds like, that the University of Manitoba does facilitate and support its Indigenous Aboriginal students. I'm going to hit to Kendall. As a kid, you went to a couple of schools that were primarily non-Indigenous, and the culture shock was difficult, but you could adapt and carve a place for yourself. Can you tell me, or tell the audience, about the culture shock?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendall. I just want to start off by saying thank you to our elder for the prayer. It's an honor to be here today and for Inspire inviting me out here. In terms of culture shock, when I was a kid growing up on Sweetgrass, my first time I had to leave the reserve to go into a different school, which was a farming community. It was called Cut Knife. So in grade 3, my mom put me in this different school, and immediately I knew that I was different. I was one of the few First Nations people in the school, and I had to, what Suzette just said, adapt. And if I didn't adapt, I probably would have been put into resource rooms like a lot of my other First Nations brothers and sisters were put in, because they weren't understood at that time by the teachers and why they were quiet, why they couldn't fit in, why they weren't speaking up in classroom. So I knew if I didn't adapt, I would probably put in that room. So I knew that my buddies, well, later would become my buddies, were farmers. So what do farmers talk about? The weather, their crops, and so on. So I would talk to my friends at grade 3, hey buddy, how much rain you get last night? How are your crops doing? You know, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I just wanted to make friends. So that's how I made friends at recess. Now we eventually, then I used what I was good at, which was sports, and we became friends at recess playing sport. And carrying over into high school, I went to a different school. Again, one of the few First Nations people, again, same thing, but at this time I was getting better at adapting. And up until the point, even to university, it's, you know, especially if you're going from a First Nation community or a small town community and you go into a big city, you're living in two worlds, okay? And in order to fit in the other world, you have to adapt, and you have to adapt to their personalities, how they talk, how they walk, how they dress. And that's how I run my business now.
You know what? It's amazing. I have to say something. When I say your name, Kendall, and I think netmaker, I think a networker, because at such a young age, you were learning to network and adapt. So, you know, you can see it online as well. You're quite connected in the community across the country. Congratulations on your success, by the way. Thank you. Elizabeth, as the first person in your family to attend university, who did you go to for support when you started planning to leave?
That's a really good question. So I actually, when I was in my last year of high school, I had a skidoo accident, and I broke my leg. So I had to miss 2 months of high school, and that put me behind a bit. You know, I had to go to college and do a year of transition so I can boost up my grades to get into university, and at that point, you know, I was 17, just turned 18, and I really connected with my professor, with my college teachers and my community. And, you know, I was the only girl in physics class, and I was the top, and I got, you know, I was an A+ student in physics, and, you know, and the reason for that was because the community of people that I was surrounded by in the classroom were peers that I knew. They were people that I grew up with, people that I played volleyball with, people I played badminton against, people who I can identify in their community, and I could sense, you know, and I didn't realize that. And my professor was from India. He was a college professor, and I didn't really fully understand physics all the time, but he would strenuously, you know, say to me, "You're so smart, you just need to put a little effort into it." And so I would spend like, an hour after class being like, what in the world, why is the sky blue? Like he used to explain that to me. At one point he did, which was quite strange. And also my English professor in college who, he could talk for hours. Like you ask him a question and he could just talk and talk and talk. And I was like, how does your brain work? Like, anyhow, it was because he has a PhD in English and he has to read novels and write things. So anyhow, and he challenged me because English was my toughest subject. I graduated high school with an English average of like 52, and I was really good at math. So I struggled with English a lot. And so my teachers, in college were the ones who I went to a lot for support in terms of like succeeding academically. And also my dad, my dad would say, I can allow you can do whatever you want, I'll support you. Just get out there and keep pursuing your education. And my stepdad as well, and my mom, my stepdad was really always there. He said, you have access to financial resources to pursue post-secondary education, so make sure that, you have that because it might not always be there. And make sure that you keep doing and pushing yourself to do better, and education is the way. So it was a compilation of like my instructors, professors at college, but I didn't have a lot of people that, I went to high school with who pursued post-secondary education. So I didn't really know who to look to in terms of like, they can do it, then I can do it too kind of feeling. So that was always something that I was kind of looking to, but yeah, my family and my college professors and instructors, and yeah.
Well, when you're thinking about like all the people, like the instructors and your family, who has kind of inspired you, when you're in school and then to take that leap into post-secondary education?
Well, I would have to say that, I used to go to the Friendship Center and go on the internet when I was a kid. They had free internet, and I'd go into the youth room forever and just go on there and play like Yahoo Pool and Solitaire and all this stuff. And there was a lady one time who came in, and she was a PhD math person, I think, and she used to tutor high school students in math. And she was so different, right? Like growing up in a community of 10,000 people, and someone who I don't really know comes in, and she seems really smart. She dresses nice. She's really smart. And then, I used to always ask her, like, where did you go to school, and what made you want to go, and how did you know you can go? And like, just seeing that she was really smart and really, aspired to be somebody who contributed to the community and that she really enjoyed what she was doing, that was somebody that inspired me. And I knew inside that for some reason when I was a kid, I always looked up to lawyers because they, growing up in Labrador, you're always going to run into different things sometimes. And I think that lawyers always seemed really articulate and well-read and very well-spoken. And I really valued how much they used their brain. So that was something generally that I remember. I want to be like this person who reads a lot, who knows a lot, who understands a lot, who's educated. And that was kind of, a little bit of the inspiration that I kind of took from.
And now you're that person. You're that role model for sure. Fauna, you were talking about earlier when you moved to Winnipeg. Why did you said a little bit about why you chose the University of Manitoba, but if you want to delve into it a little bit more, what were the challenges coming down and relocating?
Well, a lot like Elizabeth, it's really overwhelming. I think people who are from like the South, what we call it, people who are from the South, if you're in Nunavut, obviously everything is South, but just little things. Like I was very lucky in the sense that my parents encouraged traveling a lot. So just to get an idea, Iqaluit's on an island, so you have to fly wherever you go. We don't have roads connecting our towns. Like you have to fly, and it's quite expensive. It's like $2,000 just from Iqaluit to Ottawa. So in order to kind of make sure that I was ready to go, I think my parents really encouraged traveling. So I was very fortunate that I got to get out of my community quite often. I realized not everyone has that. So I was somewhat, I would say, more prepared than perhaps the average Nunavut grad, but I mean, just little things like taking the bus. We don't have buses. Sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks. Sidewalk crossings. Just little things like radio, listening to the radio. Like we barely had a radio. Just like the amount of people, and also like kind of when you come down to the south, you stock up. You're like, okay, I'm going back north. I gotta get all my clothes. I gotta get all this stuff, and like for a year, I gotta like stock up. And so for the longest time, I'd go to the store and I'd buy like so much. Like I was preparing for World War III, and I'd have like so much stuff. And they're like, okay, like you have one room in your dorm. How about you not like? How about it's not a bunker? So kind of just getting used to like a different pace of life. It's just totally different. But yeah, and trees. We don't have trees. So, totally different vegetation and everything else, so, yeah.
I love that because you don't really think about things like that. That's so awesome to share. Thank you so much. I love it. Now I'm going to have to go Google online too, right? Kendall, is today your birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kendall. Happy birthday to you. Yes.
No, I'm ready.
Yay!
Thank you.
Kendall, happy birthday. Okay, so. How old are you? Yes, how old are you? Do you want
30.
The big 30, yes.
30.
Oh, I love this question because it's sort of a segue. But what would you say now to your grade 3 self who switched school from, you were mentioning, cut knife, and was learning to exist in a non-native environment?
Take advantage of your opportunities right away. I'll give you an example. Just this morning, I was sitting at the cafe at the Fort Garry Hotel, right? And I noticed there was an opportunity right there. And I didn't know who this person was. I recognized him, like, that person looks like this person I just seen on TV, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, should I go say hi? He's like right here beside me. And then he left. And then the waitress comes to me and says, Kendall, do you know who that was? I was like, he looked like John Wick. Like, that's Keanu Reeves. I was like, oh my God. My son's Keanu, you know what I mean? So anyways, that's probably what I told myself is take advantage of your opportunities when you get them. There's so many times I wanted to quit, and a lot of things in my life, growing up on First Nations to when I got into the mainstream in elementary. Like, there was many times I didn't want to play sports because of who I was. I wasn't comfortable with myself. I was a very shy, timid kid. I was always the kid in the back of the room who didn't say a lot. Getting into high school, same thing. I was very self-conscious. I was bullied a lot verbally, so every time I go on to play sports, I was always harassed because I'd have the talent, but of course, people use the words when they can't really physically do anything to you. So a lot of the times I would be verbally bullied by a lot of people. And then into college and university, when I started my business, I started to mature. I was 23 when I started Nietzsche Gear. I was a full-time education student, so outside of my background, I was at the University of Saskatchewan studying 5 classes to become a teacher. My last semester, I had the idea to start Nietzsche Gear. I didn't know how to start a business. I had no idea where to begin. So I reached out to mentors in the Saskatoon community, and I had to throw myself out there. I asked them, hey, can I buy you coffee? Can I take you for coffee? He said, please keep it Tim Hortons because I can't afford Starbucks yet, right? So I would take them out for doubles, and I would sit there with a notepad and pen. And around this time, the first iPad came out. So I couldn't afford the iPad, or a laptop yet. So I had the old school notepad and pen, and I would sit there and take notes. And that's how I learned to write a business plan. And I submitted the business plan, and now I had to learn how to pitch my business. Terrified of public speaking at the time. And I had to practice in secluded University of Saskatchewan classrooms where they'd have a projector, and I'd put my slides there late at night. I'd show up, and I would practice till like 1, 2, 3 in the morning, just in front of no one. And that's how I got the confidence to do public speaking and do my first pitch. And, and it led me to this day where I'm here, so.
Yeah. Well, I do receive your newsletters, and you do a lot of mentoring for young entrepreneurs. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah.
Because you do a lot of online stuff as well.
Yeah. So in 2015, after, things were going awesome with Nietzsche Gear. And I always had with Nietzsche Gear, I got asked to go to all these communities in Saskatchewan and eventually across Canada to share my story of how to start a business and so on. So as that became more required by other people, I thought, there's a model here to help people. So I thought of creating the Netmaker Academy, which is an online academy which helps young professionals and entrepreneurs to start or grow their businesses. So I started doing the filming a year ago in my office and around Saskatoon. I got a camera, I was able to afford a film crew for a day and so on. I was able to gradually work that way. And then I had all these training videos. I put all my resources on there, everything I knew how to start a business, okay? And then I started to do webinars, and I started to go to do my own seminars in my store, and people would come in, and then that's how I got my first students. And now I got 25 students across Canada enrolled in my academy. So it's crazy how things work out, yeah.
That's wonderful. I love that. Yeah. Well, now with the internet, you can be inspired by so many role models across the country. I mean, even if you looked, have you ever gone on LinkedIn and you're looking and you see all these amazingly educated, talented people in our communities across Canada, and so I do love that everyone can have access if they have the internet, right?
One thing Kendall didn't say about Keanu Reeves is that you sent him a shirt to his room. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So you took that opportunity.
That's so cool.
I had to tell the front lady, I was like, I was just having breakfast with Keanu Reeves, and I told him I'd give him the shirt.
Say Keanu.
Keanu.
Keanu having breakfast,
So, it was just acting all casual. Tried not to be shaking when I was telling them, but.
How could he not wear it? I love that.
Now we just have to get paparazzi to go and find him in that shirt, and then it'll be all over Us Weekly.
Yeah. All
right, Elizabeth. How do you stay in touch with your Inuit culture and language living so far away from home?
That's a really good question. Because after leaving Labrador, going from Goose Bay to Halifax, I went from Halifax, working in Ottawa for 3 summers, and then I went to Finland, and then I went to West Africa, and then I went to, I've lived almost in every province in the country. And I did, lived in Saskatoon, lived in Victoria, lived in Vancouver. And I noticed just kind of becoming somebody that really enjoys learning. Like I grow around intellectual conversation and nurturing and writing and reading. And that's my kind of space. When I first started university, connected to my community in Halifax, there weren't other Inuit students. Going to the south, as you mentioned earlier, is a lot of First Nations and other cultures that are predominantly in the urban settings, and Inuit were mostly in more northern areas. Other than Winnipeg, I think there's quite a few Inuit here. But I found calling home was something I would do, and during my second year of university, I would travel home, go home during Christmas. I'd go home in April, and then before I'd leave to work in Ottawa, in April I'd go home for a couple of weeks. And as I began to travel more, I always go home. I'll go somewhere for a bit, whether it's for school, whether it's for work, and then I'll just travel back to be home with my family. When I finished my law degree in 2015, I had a strong desire, because you look at the map, Labrador's on one side, British Columbia's on the other, and that was a huge transition in culture, in geography, in demographics, in just everything was just complete, climate change, just everything was so different. But when I finished 3 years of an intense program, I realized that I wanted to reconnect with my home and my community and bring my education back to, where I'm from. And so I did my articles back home in Goose Bay with legal aid doing criminal and family law. And it was my way of recontributing back to where I come from. And so that's one way, is I'll always go home after I travel, I'll work there. And I stay in touch. Right now, I travel between St. John's and Goose Bay, and I play quite a bit of sports. So I play volleyball with the St. John's Native Friendship Center, and a majority of the team, they're from home, from Labrador. So I stay in touch through sports. And on the board of directors, like I reach out to connect with, like, you know, I try and do board stuff. But I always kind of stay connected to home. But if I want to pursue a higher education or post-secondary education, then, you know, that means I have to leave. So I'm always trying to find different ways to stay connected. But my family comes to me too, you know, in the cities and stuff, and I show them around. But yeah.
And I think that's so important too. You know, not everybody has the luxury, so we kind of build a community where we are and stay connected with our family. And I think that's really important to stay a part of our culture. Fauna, while you're going to university, what resources were available that you needed, and or some resources that you wish you had?
Well, I think in my first year, I had to do University 1. So I always knew I was a weird kid. From like 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be an accountant. Don't know why. It's like a weird profession for an 8-year-old to choose. I was just good at math, so I was like, oh, I'll be an accountant. I don't know. So I always kind of knew what I wanted to be, and so all my decisions in terms of education kind of led up to that. But University 1, I wasn't quite sure. I mean, I kind of reached out to different organizations, but I think in terms of kind of shaping who I am now, I think it was just almost, you have to reach out. You have to be the one. Not everything's going to come to you. I mean, we like to think that when you get off the plane, like there's going to be a welcome wagon and people are going to tell you what to do, but it's not like that, obviously. So you get here, you basically have to reach out. And so I did reach out to Access. I reached out to the business program at Asper. I did just kind of did research on, like, okay, what opportunities are available? What do I want to do? What do I want to get involved with? So I just chose to kind of basically focus on my studies. I had five courses my first year each term. And kind of as I got more into my education, ABEP, which is Aboriginal Business Education Partners, were really critical. It wasn't so much the program, it was the people. I think, same with Inspire. It's not so much the money and all that kind of stuff, it's the people. That's what makes a company, an organization, that's what makes it. And so it was definitely those people that I could turn to and say, okay, I'm having a tough time with this, what do I do? You know, I hate this course, I don't like this professor, this isn't working for me, tell me what to do. Sometimes you just have to ask somebody to tell you what to do. Because you're all kind of thrown in here, like from wherever we're from, and it's basically sink or swim. So you have to sometimes ask for help, because no one expects you to be able to have all the answers. I mean, how could you? So it's just basically asking, I think, for help. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm noticing about the three of you. You're all like go-getters. If you want to know something, you've all gone and done it and become adaptable and achieved the things that you want. So I want to commend all three of you, because you can see some common themes here, right? Kendall, we know that through your company, Nietzsche Gear, as well as the coaching you've done, you're a strong advocate for First Nations youth in sports. From your experience, how can sports impact Indigenous students' education?
Well, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for sport and being able to play sport. Growing up on the reserve, most communities, it's very hard to get housing on reserve. So when we got our house on the reserve, a little 2-bedroom house, we just moved out of my Kukum's, my late grandma's house, and we got a little 2-bedroom house on the reserve. And I had a room, my 3 younger sisters had a room, my mom slept on the couch. So that happened right up until grade 12. And every single day outside, I'd force my younger sister, Kendra, to come play soccer with me or come play whatever we can play outside. And eventually, my best friend helped me in grade 5, and then that transferred into playing more sports in grade 10. And I didn't really think about my schooling up to this point. The sport was keeping me involved in school. And when it came time to grade 12, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was like, you know, I see people on my reserve building houses over here, but I also see a few people going to university. I'm going to apply and see what happens. I applied to the University of Saskatchewan to the education program. I didn't get in. And I was shattered. You know, I got the letter saying, sorry, your marks aren't good enough, right? And at the time, most of my marks were in like the 60s. And so my only opportunity was another person who was from Saskatchewan said, hey, Kendall, I'm going to Fort McMurray, Alberta to coach a volleyball team. Why don't you come play some volleyball? I've seen you play. And I was like, this is my only opportunity, because all you needed to get into this college was a 60, and I had that. And I was pumped. So I moved away for a few years. I went to Fort McMurray Piano College, played some volleyball, came back to the University of Saskatchewan. I said, I'm going to apply again, see what happens. But I'm too scared to go to the education program. I'm going to apply to the Open Arts and Science program. I got in. I was excited. 2 weeks before classes started, this is the power of a cold call, okay? So 2 weeks before the classes started, I noticed that that same program I had got rejected from had a flyer, and they were expanding across Saskatchewan. So I said, I'm going to call this number and see if I can get more information. So I picked up the phone, and just so happened that the director of the program picked up the phone. His name is Orist. So Orist picks up the phone. I'm like, hello, my name is Kendall Netmaker. I had applied to your program in grade 12, never got in. What do I got to do to get in your program? We talked for 1, 2, 3 minutes, and I was in the program. The original program, I never got in after grade 12. So ever since 2007, I was starting to become a teacher, and you know the rest of the story. So it's just crazy, yeah.
That's awesome.
So if you had words of wisdom for young people out there, what should they be doing? What should they be thinking about today in 2017?
Yeah, especially for First Nations or Indigenous people across Canada. I'm just like anyone else out there. You know, I grew up single-parented, living on welfare, didn't have the opportunities growing up as a kid. So if there's anyone out there watching this, it's regardless of where you come from and what you've gone through, you can always change it. My mom used to tell me that. My mom's mother, my late Kukum, used to tell her that. If you don't like the way things are right now, when you get a chance, change it. But you have to be the person that step up and do that.
All right, Elizabeth, you mentioned before Canada is the only circumpolar country that doesn't have a university above the 50th parallel. What do you think would be different in Canada if we did have a university in the north?
Ooh. Well, I think just rural and like rural populations, you know, whether you're rural from, you know, coming from a city and you're rural living away from like post-secondary education, or you're more like super rural, like coming up from like the north. If we had access to post-secondary education where a lot of Indigenous people have been pushed to, and if we had access to, you know, post-secondary education in the northern regions, I think we're the only, like we would have the opportunities that are available to people that live in urban settings. And with that, I think higher education means, you know, being able to study things that we would like to study, becoming teachers, becoming lawyers, becoming doctors, and not having to experience so much of the stuff that we have to experience when we have to move from one place to the next to pursue our educational and career dreams. So I think, you know, it would mean less moving, probably more graduates from post-secondary institutions, more Indigenous specific, you know, programming that would be good to meet the needs of Indigenous students from that particular context. Because you say Indigenous, but it's so diverse. Like, you know, coming from Labrador, the Indigenous people are really different from people who are in BC, from people who are in the prairies, from people who are, like Inuit and Nunavut are different from people from home in Labrador. Like, we have the capacity to, you know, create our own programs, and it's just, I think if we had universities in the north or more post-secondary institutions, it would add to a greater, more opportunities for us, and less of us having to go through those extra hurdles in order for us to succeed academically and career-wise. Yeah.
I just want to congratulate Elizabeth also. You've been called to the bar as well. So yes. Yes. Congratulations. We have time for one more general question from me, and then we want to turn it to the audience, all of you, because as you're hearing these stories, you probably want to ask a few questions. I also want to congratulate Kendall, and Fauna is in business as well, which is really cool. So I know you've taken the leap into something like this, but quickly, what role did Inspire play in shaping your education? So we'll give a minute for each of you to answer that. So we'll start here.
Well, my experience with Inspire goes back when I was 15, and I applied and received their bursary. So the bursary is for high school students, and so I received 2 of those, one in grade 11 and one in grade 12. And then they supported me every year through my undergrad at the University of Manitoba. And then they supported me again. Well, during that time, I also won the Youth Award, which is $10,000. And then again, at the University of Saskatchewan, through my master's program, they supported me again. And I spoke at all their events, like their Blueprints for the Future, and a few events to do with the Indspire Awards. And then I was asked to be part of the board. So now I'm on the Indspire Board of Director. I'm on the executive committee. And I'm the youngest female on that board.
Yay.
Yeah. So again, like my love of Inspire goes back to when I was like a teenager, and I always tell them they're like a branch of my family, because a lot of these employees have been there forever and have known me since I was 15, and now I'm 32. So that's a pretty long-term relationship, longest term I've had. So yeah, they definitely played a pivotal role in my life, I think, in terms of just not even financial, but just, you know, Roberta Jameson, who's an amazing CEO. Like, what do I do? What would you do in this situation?
Yeah.
Just having that kind of bounce ideas off of is really great.
Awesome. Thank you.
So basically Inspire, I applied for a scholarship first when I was in my undergrad, predominantly because, you know, I lived in residence for the first 2 years, and residence was it was a great place to adjust to the city, but it was also really expensive. So, you know, help with costs of accommodation while I was in Halifax at Dalhousie. I did the program of legal studies for Native people in Saskatoon at the University of Saskatchewan, and they helped support me financially with that, which was really, really, really helpful. And throughout my law school studies, like leaving from Victoria and going over to Labrador for Christmas and stuff, it's a long haul, but it's also quite pricey. And so they helped financially with that. I stayed connected with the amazing stories that Inspire does through, you know, the people that won the award when I won it, just seeing their posts on Instagram, on Facebook, seeing the amazing things they're doing. Just seeing amazing stories come out of Inspire for, you know, those positive stories that come from Indigenous communities to show that, you know, as an Indigenous person, we're not just this narrative that, you know, the sort of idea that, you know, you're Indigenous, so you must go through struggles. Yes, that's true. But also, I find Inspire does a really great job of showcasing the positive things that we're doing in our communities and as people. And so I like those aspects as well. Yeah.
So aside from these geniuses, I didn't have the amazing marks, like I said, even in university. So with that mindset, I didn't have the confidence to even put my name forward for any of the scholarships or even bursaries at the time. So I encourage everyone in here not to let that stop you, to apply to Inspire, to apply to many applications that you can, that you qualify for, because you just never know what's going to happen from that. It took me up until, what was it, when I was 26, when I got encouraged for my name to stand for the Inspire Award. And at the time, I was thinking, you know what, okay, we'll see what happens from that. And then I just happened to be in Winnipeg, attending the Jay-Z and Beyonce concert back in the day. And I got a call from the CEO, Roberta Jameson, and she said, Kendall, I have some amazing news. You are the First Nations recipient for the 2015 Inspire Awards. And that, you know, gave a ton of exposure. The awards were amazing. It brought out more engagements or sales and so on. So I can't even tell you here the amount of things that have happened because of Inspire for me. So I encourage everyone else to take advantage of the opportunities because they're out there. You just got to take the leap, make it happen.
Yes. And you know, you can, when we're done, you can go back, because we have
we, at the back, we have an information booth too, so you can go and see what's all available. Fauna, Elizabeth, Kendall, you're all so amazing and inspiring. And I want to turn it over to the room now as well. So if you have any burning questions or
Who's
any
got a
thoughts-
question? I'm coming to you with the
Yeah.
mic. Sean, you must have a question for our laureates.
Yeah. And it could be directed to one or all. Yep.
I know there's a lot of young people here. I'm not so young myself, but what can you tell them that'll really inspire them to want to be up on that stage one day? And you know, what are the things they can do to inspire one another? And what inspires you, really? That's the whole theme of Inspire. I really want to know what inspires you guys.
I mean, I guess I would have to say, like, similar to Elizabeth, I didn't have anyone in my family who went to university who could kind of say, I want to be like them, or, you know, I didn't really have that. So you kind of have to, it sounds corny, but you kind of have to be the person that you would have wanted to look up to back when you were a child. So that's kind of what I wanted to be. I also grew up in a family where there was some addictions, and so I remember thinking, when I was in high school, I could take this path and I could follow this path, and it could be basically just repeat the cycle. Or I can do this and be completely different and do what I want to do and follow my passions. And so kind of being cognizant of that, of being, okay, like I could do this way, and probably like a lot of people do end up in, or I could do something completely different. And so it's kind of just knowing that moment, and for some reason that moment always stuck with me, of just being, okay, I want to be this, and just kind of really focusing on that. I guess that's all I can really say about that.
Okay, I'll go first. What inspires me, man? You know, there's so many times in my life where I could have went in a different direction. I could have went down a destructive path. So many times it could have happened. And then I see a lot of my friends that are going through that path, or people I grew up with that are incarcerated, suicide. And I think of just how lucky I am to be here, and for the people who have raised me. My mom who single-parented me, my late kokam who raised me, the ceremonies back home, and being around that's my foundation, right? So I think about that, and the privilege that I get now to be on a panel like this, to share my messages across Canada. I just want to be the best role model I can be for other people. That's what drives me, because I could be just like anyone out there, you know, struggling. I've been there, and now I'm doing my best to just be a role model, so I can try to help uplift people and tell them that, you know, regardless of where you are in your life, where you've been, you can always change it. You can become anything you want. If you're going through a rough time right now, you can always change it. You just got to change your surrounding, your mindset, and so on. All these different things. It's like a video game. You know what I mean? You just got to program yourself differently, and your outside your world can become a different place for you. So, just trying to be a role model. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I actually, I love to learn. I think that's one thing that kind of makes me feel like that kind of inspires me. Like, I love being around people who challenge me, you know, intellectually, and I really enjoy, I really, 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 really enjoy seeing people of color as professors. And those are some people that I really look up to. You know, like Val Napoleon. Anybody know Val Napoleon? John Burroughs. Yeah. Tayage Alfred. You know, I was working in Ottawa at Poktutit, Inuit Women of Canada, and I was learning political science and international development studies, but I was working in this office, and what I was doing felt somewhat monotonous, and I didn't know if it was actually contributing to, you know, what it was that I really felt valued. Like, I didn't know if that was really what, like, it just felt like pushing paper. And then I seen a video one time of Tayage Alfred talking about colonization and decolonization and sort of what that means. And he spoke so eloquently. The video was like almost an hour long. I think it was a lecture, but it felt like 10 minutes. And that for me was something that I felt like that inspired me. The fact that he could, you know, so eloquently and radically express himself through words and get his point across. And I thought that was something that I really valued. So I like being around people who I find challenge me and nurture me. But I look up to people that like are professors. And I guess the reason for that is there was a lady that I worked with in Saskatoon who's a lawyer actually, and she taught me Aboriginal law. And she said, education is all about learning who you are. Your entire life, you're going to be figuring out who you are. And you're going to go through different things, and that's going to change. So I guess, yeah, it's just continuous kind of learning, reflection, reading. Yeah, those are the types of things that I like. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, we've got another question right here. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks, guys. So, pardon me, I missed the first part of your talk, but super amazing stories that you guys have to share, and just thank you so much for being here and doing that. I have a question about challenges. So, whenever we go on to accomplish great things, there's usually at least several obstacles, but usually like a big, big obstacle that tries to get in our way of our success. So I'm just wondering, what was your biggest obstacle to getting to where you are, and how did you overcome that?
Great question.
I would probably say in my personal life, it was definitely family addiction. So I mean, both my parents were alcoholics. My mom has been sober for over 20 years, so for most of my life, so that's great. But I mean, definitely going through that, any children of alcoholics, you know that your whole life is kind of chaos. And so I think a part of the reason I'm so successful is because I wanted to control. I wanted to control what I could, and that was me. That was my success. That was studying. That was my goals. I was like my own little world that I could control. And so when you're raised in a world where you don't know what's going to happen next and things are kind of unpredictable, you learn really young to say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to fix it and I'm going to harness it and I'm going to control it. That can have bad effects later on in life when you're a control freak and you can't let things go. So kind of when I kind of was at the pivotal of my success, I would say that I suffered from a bit of burnout, because you think as controlling and kind of keeping everything together and everything's great and you wanted to be this picture perfect person that has it all together, and you can't. And so I kind of suffered from a bit of burnout. And actually, it was at the University of Manitoba, and I took on way too much, and I went to Ottawa. I had a picture with Prime Minister Martin. It was on the front page of the Free Press. Came back, saw the picture. I just wrote an exam. I was studying all night. Saw the picture at the Aboriginal programs, and they were like proud of me, and I started crying because I was like, I'm so tired, and they're like, you need to sleep. So it's knowing your limitations and just knowing like you're only one person. You cannot do it all, and you do not have to have it together all the time. And you
Like
cannot
that.
control everything.
That's right.
So that's kind of the biggest lesson I learned from it.
Oh, wow. The challenges.
Yeah.
The big
obstacles.
whoppers. Well, getting into law school is real tough, and traveling across the country from, Halifax, Labrador to Saskatoon to Victoria is a challenge. Learning to say no, is really important. But I would assume that the biggest whopper that I experienced in the past year, 2 years, was, going from working and being surrounded by very, diverse people in law school who were very opinionated, well-read, challenged me but nurtured me, and it wasn't in a way that was like destructive, but it was more like the expression of theoretical ideas was there, and it was safe to talk about things, where it was kind of like a bubble, you know. And then this idea that, you know, I want to do criminal defense back home in Labrador because I want to defend Indigenous people away from state infringement, over criminalization, over incarceration of Indigenous people back home. Like, this is not right. And then I went from Victoria to Labrador, from this bubble to this complete 180 of being thrown into court, you know, taking on like trials, doing sentencing, doing bail hearings, working with people that I went to school with, you know. That internally was a huge like reflection moment. And I'm still figuring out how I can, you know, work what I've learned through that process in a healthy way. But while I was doing my articles and getting my call to the bar, I had to write 6 bar exams. And in that process, my dad almost died. Yeah. So he ended up getting the flu that turned into pneumonia, and he landed in the ICU for 4 months. So I had to move my life from Goose Bay to St. John's, back and forth to make sure he's fine. My family came in. I come from a really big family of 14. My dad is the oldest of 14. So it was hard seeing him, you know, cling to life by these machines while I was becoming a lawyer and doing articling and working in family law, which is also a tough area. And so I had to step back and be like, this is a lot. I'm not 30, but I want to get my call to the bar real quick, but I need to take a step back from here and just say no right now. You know, I'm going to finish my articles. I'm going to write these exams. I did it. My dad's home. He's safe. He's happy. He's better. He's, you know, on the mend, but still it's just a moment of being like, you know what, this is really tough. I'm going to take a step back here and take care of myself right now. So I think it's important to find those, you know, you're not on a treadmill to try and keep up with a certain achievement sometimes, and realize that, you know, saying no is fine. You know, if you can't handle the pressures that are happening, that's one thing that I've had to learn how to do as well, and I'm becoming better at it. And taking time for myself, like doing things that are more healing, grounding, and not feeling guilty for it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, those things.
Thank you. Kendall?
My greatest obstacle is myself. And I think that's the true thing for everyone in this room. And, you know, where we are right now in our lives is a result of the conditioning from birth and everything that you learned in the back of your mind, right? So when I first started to get asked to go and speak, I was terrified, you know, and I thought, you know what, I used to wonder, what's this person thinking about me? What's this person thinking about me? And my very first presentation, Shinichi Gear had forced me to go and share my story. And my first presentation looked like something like this. I had a room like this in a gymnasium, and I was sitting right here, and they called my name up. And at the time, I was too scared to speak from the heart, so I had some notes. And they said, Kendall Netmaker, come on up. And the whole time I'm looking at that platform, I'm thinking, that's an awfully shaky set of stairs. And I'm like, man, because I've seen people wobbling on that thing. I'm thinking, oh, I better not trip. So when they called me up, I trip, and I gashed my shin. And people are laughing, the crowd's laughing, and I could feel some blood trickling down my shin. And I get up to the podium, and I'm too scared to look at everyone. My face is red. There's sweat coming down my face, and all you hear is this. My first presentation. And had I let myself think I'm not ever going to speak again, I wouldn't have had the opportunities to come and speak here. I wouldn't have had a chance to go speak at WeDay, to speak around the globe, to be to Dubai, Russia, and so on. You see, all those things were limiting beliefs of what I believed about myself. And if you change about what you believe about yourself and the things that you can accomplish, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, you can tell he's a motivational speaker. I love it. All right.
Make sure we have everyone.
Yes.
A question? Any other questions? We've had some great questions. Thanks very much for that question. Thanks for that question. Anyone else? One more question?
Cool swag too. I believe we have.
One more question. Our last question.
Last question.
It's a quick one. What's the last book that you guys read, or last piece of information that you've read that you've walked away and gone, this has helped me somehow?
My current book that I'm reading right now is When Breath Becomes Air. It's I don't remember the man's name, but basically he was a neurosurgeon. I'm reading this on the plane, and I just couldn't put it down. But it's a book about a neurosurgeon who is he died in March 2015 from a lung disease. And he talks about his experience of, coming from an immigrant family and his family really pushing him to pursue an education and really sturgeon about that and getting him to read as he was growing up. And he embarked upon an educational journey of learning English. And in learning English, he realized that he loved literature, he loved this, but he didn't understand truly the meaning of life connection. He felt as though it was this theoretical thing. So he said, how can I begin to learn more about the meaning of life? And so he's like, I'm going to get into medicine. And he talks about his journey of learning medicine, learning like neuroscience, and he meets his wife and stuff, and the meaning of life. And then he gets diagnosed with a terminal lung illness that he dies from in March 2015. And so when he's in the midst of dying in the hospital, he writes this book. And through it, I'm assuming, I haven't yet finished, he's going to disclose a little bit more about what he's learning from lived experience rather than studying philosophers in English and being a neurosurgeon, about what the meaning of life is. So that's what I'm reading currently.
Cool. Kendall.
Okay, so shortly after that presentation, just kidding. No, in 2014, when I was at an event in Beardy's and Okinawa's First Nation, and at the back of the room after I was done speaking, this guy had a little sticky note, and he gave it to me after the presentation, and on it said something. I couldn't really read what it said, and I didn't think nothing of it. A month later was Christmas, and I was sitting there 2 weeks before it's with family and whatnot. It was on my monitor. I was like, okay, I'm gonna check out what this guy put on this thing, and I read it said, "Less brown you deserve." I was like, okay, I typed this into YouTube. And ever since I watched that video, it changed my life. This guy's one of the top motivational speakers on the planet, right? So I started to invest my mind into audio programs. So every time I drive, I'm listening to people like Zig Ziglar, Les Brown, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, all those kind of guys, right? Because I'm trying to program my mind to think better and trying to achieve more, right? Trying to think that I can do these kind of things. So I encourage everyone, if you guys are driving down traffic, you spend hundreds of hours every year just driving, right? Imagine the amount of education you can get just from an audio program. And that's what I've done ever since that day. And I read the people that I want to be like. I read their books. I don't read other like fantasy, fictional books. I read things that I want to learn. So I read Les Brown's books, Zig Ziglar, all those kind of people. So.
I tend to read more financial. Here's the accountant. I tend to read more like financial. I really love Gail Van Oxlade. She does like Princess or Till Death Do Us Part on TV. And I love her books because they're really like simple. They just kind of tell you what to do, and I love it when people could just like tell me what to do to get what I want. And so, so she has a really good book called Money Talks, and it's basically 101 rules. She's shaking her head because she's also an Indigenous accountant. Yeah, just money rules, money talks, and it basically says 101 things that you should do. I really like that one. And I also just finished my certified Aboriginal finance manager course. So they were doing a lot of like academic books, and so Skyscrapers was really good. It talks about Indigenous history and how we are kind of in modern society. So those are kind of my books.
That's amazing. You know, I think that listening to all your journeys and your stories, you've all overcome adversities, obstacles. We can see the passion, and passion not only for what you do, but also the community and being role models. So thank you so much for sharing today. I know you'll be able to mingle with everyone, but it's been such a great honor to hear your stories as well. And you know, you can go stalk them like I do on social media and take some photos. But it's been so wonderful having you here today. Give them a round of applause, you know. So at this time, we'll close our panel. And then also, you can kind of hang out here. And I think we do have
Does your community group or organization have an educational session, lecture, or workshop that you would like to have on Winnipeg Talks? Send us an email at creatv@sean.ca. Give us a call at 204-480-3500 or find us online at Sean TV Winnipeg.